Hello everyone, and welcome back to Spring Java Lab. In today's video, we are going to cover a very practical, highly requested real-world scenario: how to use Spring Batch to read multiple CSV files from a folder and import all that data directly into a database. If you are a complete beginner to Spring Batch, don't worry, we are going to take this step by step. Let's start by setting up our project. Go ahead and open up start.spring.io in your browser. For the project type, we will select Maven, and the language will be Java. We will stick with the latest stable Spring Boot version, which is 4.1.0. Moving down to the project metadata. For the group ID, it is best practice to use your domain name, so I will type in com.springjavalab. For the artifact, we want a name that describes exactly what we are building, so let's name it Spring Batch Multi-File Import. We will leave the packaging as jar and select Java 21. Now for the most important part, the dependencies. Let's click on Add Dependencies. First, we need Spring Batch, which is our core framework for batch processing. Next, we will add Spring Data JPA, because we need to save the data we read from our files into the database. For the database in this tutorial, we will be using Oracle, so search for the Oracle driver and add that. And finally, to keep our code clean and avoid writing boilerplate getters, setters, and constructors, we will add Lombok. Perfect. Take a quick second to verify that your screen matches mine exactly. Once you are ready, just hit that Generate button. This will download a zip file. Go ahead and extract that, and open it up in your favorite IDE. It might take a minute or two for Maven to download all the dependencies and sync the project. Once that is done, we will move on to the next step and start writing our code. Alright, now that our project is imported and all dependencies are resolved, the first thing we need to do is connect to our Oracle database. Let's open up application.properties. Here, we are going to add our database URL, username, and password. I will paste my local Oracle XE credentials here. Make sure to update these with your own database details. We will also add spring.jpa.hibernate.ddlauto equals update so that Hibernate automatically creates our table for us, and spring.jpa.showSQL equals true so we can see the insert queries in our console. Finally, we'll add spring.batch.job.enabled equals true so that our job runs automatically as soon as we start the Spring Boot application. Next, let's set up the multiple CSV files we want to read. Inside Resources, create a new folder and name it Data. Inside this data folder, let's create two simple CSV files. I will call the first one employees1.csv and add a couple of records, ID, first name, and last name. Then, I will create a second file named employees2.csv and add two more distinct records. This simulates a real-world scenario where a third-party system might drop multiple files into a specific directory for us to process. Now we need a Java object to hold this data. Let's create a new class called employee. Since we want to save this to our database, we will annotate it with @entity and map it to a table called employee_data using the @table annotation. Instead of cluttering our class with getters, setters, and constructors, we are going to use Lombok. We'll simply add a data @noargs constructor and @allargs constructor. Then, we just define our three fields to match our CSV columns, a long ID which will be our primary key, so we mark it with @ID, a string first name, and a string last name. To handle the actual saving to the database, we need a repository. Create an interface named Employee Repository and have it extend JPA Repository. We will pass in our employee entity and long for the primary key type. And just like that, our database access layer is completely done. Alright, now let's create the core configuration file where the actual Spring Batch magic happens. I'll create a new class, name it BatchConfig, and mark it with the @configuration annotation so Spring Boot knows this contains bean definitions. First, we need to inject our employee repository which we created in the previous step. We'll declare it as employee repository and generate a quick constructor for it. Spring will automatically auto-wire this repository for us. Now, let's build the components. To read multiple files, Spring Batch uses a two-layer reading architecture. We need a Delegate reader to parse lines within a single file, and a MultiResource reader to loop through the files themselves. Let's write the Delegate reader first. First, let's set up our Delegate reader. We'll annotate this method with a bean and make it return a FlatFileItemReader of type employee. I'll simply call the method DelegateReader. Inside, instead of instantiating the reader and manually setting all its properties one by one, we are going to use the FlatFileItemReader builder of type employee. Using this builder pattern is standard practice because it keeps our configuration much cleaner and easier to read. We'll start by chaining the .name method to give our reader a unique identifier within the Spring context, so let's pass in EmployeeItemReader. Now, because our CSV files have a header row with ID, first name, last name, we have to tell Spring Batch to ignore that first line using lines to skip one. If we don't, it will try to map the text string ID into a long, and our job will crash immediately. .delimited tells the reader that our data is separated by commas. Then, .names defines the exact columns in the order they appear in the file. Next, we need to map these comma-separated values directly into our employee Java object. For that, we use a field set mapper. This bean wrapper field set mapper uses reflection to look at the column names we just defined, ID, first name, last name, and automatically matches them with the fields inside our employee class. Perfect, our delegate reader is ready. It knows exactly how to read one file. Now let's build the wrapper that feeds it multiple files. We will start with the @bean annotation. The return type here will be MultiResourceItemReader for our employee object, and we will just name the method MultiResourceItemReader. Now, inside the method arguments, we need to tell Spring exactly where to find our files. To do this dynamically, I am going to use Spring's @value annotation and pass in the path pattern, classPath, data/star.csv. This is a fantastic feature because it automatically scans our data directory and injects every single CSV file it finds directly into an array of Spring resource objects, which I will call resources. Inside the method body, we are going to create a new instance of our MultiResourceItemReader. Now, in the latest versions of Spring Batch, we are required to pass our delegate reader directly into the constructor. So, I will pass delegate reader right here. This tells the multi-resource reader exactly which parser to use for the underlying files right from the start. Next, we just need to hand it our files by calling reader.setResources, and passing in that resources array we injected. Finally, we return our fully configured reader. Now, let's move on to creating our writer. We will start by annotating the method with @bean. For the return type, we are going to use RepositoryItemWriter mapped to our employee entity. We will just keep the method name simple and call it writer inside the method body. We will instantiate a new RepositoryItemWriter. Now, to keep things extremely clean and ensure our dependencies are set up correctly from the start, we are going to pass the repository that we injected earlier directly into this constructor. This immediately links our batch writer to our Spring Data JPA layer. Next, we need to tell the writer exactly which repository method to execute when it has a chunk of data ready. So, we simply call writer.setMethodName, and pass in the standard JPA save method as a string. Spring Batch is smart enough to handle the actual batch insert logic for us behind the scenes. And to wrap it up, we just return our fully configured writer object. Thanks to the power of Spring Data JPA, we don't have to write a single line of custom SQL to save our CSV records. Now that our reader and writer are completely ready, it is time to bring them together inside a step. Let's annotate this method with @bean and make it return a step. For the method parameters, Spring Boot will automatically inject the job repository to track our steps execution state, the platform transaction manager to handle our database commits, and the multi-resource item reader that we built earlier. Inside the method, we will start by returning a new step builder. We need to give our step a unique name, so let's call it import multifile step, and we will pass in that job repository we just injected. Next, we define our chunk processing logic. By chaining employee chunk 10, we are explicitly telling Spring Batch to take our input as employee objects, write them as employee objects, and process them in batches of 10. This means it will read 10 lines from our CSV files, hold them in memory, and then perform a single database commit, which is a massive performance boost. To manage those commits properly, we chain.transaction manager, and pass in the transaction manager from our method signature. Now we just plug in our custom components. We chain.reader, and pass in our multi-resource reader variable. Then, we chain.writer, and call our writer method. Finally, we simply call .build to construct the step. And just like that, our entire data flow, reading from multiple files and writing directly into the database, is perfectly mapped out and ready to go. The very last piece of our configuration is the job itself. We will start with the @bean annotation and create a method that returns a job. Let's name it import multifile job. For the parameters, Spring Boot makes it easy. It will automatically inject the job repository and the step we just finished building. Inside the method, we are going to return a new job builder. We need to give our job a unique name, so I will pass in the string import multifile job. We also pass in the job repository right next to it, so Spring Batch knows exactly where to store all the execution metadata and run history. Now, we simply need to tell the job what to do when it runs. We chain the .start method and pass in our step. If we had multiple steps, like a validation step followed by a processing step, we would chain them using .next, but for this use case, a single step is all we need. And finally, we cap it off by calling .build. That is it. Our entire Spring Batch configuration is completely done from scratch. We have successfully wired up our application to read multiple CSV files from a folder and batch insert them straight into our Oracle database. Let's run the application and check the logs to see it in action. Alright, the application has finished running, and we have a clean exit code 0. Let's scroll up and break down exactly what just happened in our logs. First, right here, because we configured our DDL auto property to update, we can see that Hibernate automatically generated the SQL to create our employee_data table inside our Oracle database. Just a few lines down, Spring Batch takes over. We can see it automatically launched our import multifile job and immediately started executing our import multifile step. Now, here is the best part. Look at these SQL statements. Because we are manually providing the IDs in our CSV, Hibernate first runs a quick select to check if the record exists, and then we see exactly 4 insert statements executed perfectly. This proves that our MultiResourceItemReader did its job. It seamlessly picked up both employees1.csv and employees2.csv from our folder, read all 4 records, and our JPA writer batched them into the database. Finally, at the bottom, we get the confirmation that our step executed in just a few milliseconds, and our job finished with a status of completed. But before we completely wrap up, let's actually verify this data where it matters most, in our database. I am going to open up my SQL client, and let's write a quick query, select star from employee_data. I'll run this, and there we have it. We can visually confirm that all 4 records, from both employees1.csv and employees2.csv, have been perfectly imported and are sitting safely in our Oracle database. The multi-resource item reader worked exactly as expected. And that is how easy it is to process multiple files from a local folder using Spring Batch. If you found this tutorial helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to Spring Java Lab. This is a brand new channel, and your support makes a huge difference. In our next video, we are going to take this exact real-world scenario one step further. We will learn how to dynamically download these files from a remote SFTP server and then process them directly into our database. You definitely will not want to miss that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.